Welcome, Alexia. Thank you for your patience again when it comes to hooking up and connecting and sharing some of the good juice. Obviously we've known each other for a while, and you have interviewed me on your podcast I think twice now, which has always been good and very easy and very just a good experience to share and to riff and to do all of those things that happen when we come together, when like-minded people come together. But just more recently, when I started looking into your stuff, I was really inspired by your story, and I thought, God, this is so interesting. I obviously have a lot of students and a lot of practitioners who train with me who are really trying to carve their business out in this kind of landscape of perinatal mental health support, emotional health and support, and very often are motivated because they have had their own experience a bit similar to yours, and you've grown your business so beautifully, and it's such a well-known brand as well, which I'm also a bit like, oh, how's she done that? It's really good. And a bit, in awe of, because I'm more of a sales background than a marketing background, so that's why I have that sort of slight envy going on. So I just really love to find out a little bit more about your journey, because I always think there's something we can learn in other people's experiences, particularly when they've done something that we're a bit like, how's she done that? That's rather clever. So I mean, even if no one else is interested in hearing this, I'm really interested in hearing how the hell you've done that. And obviously I know that you live in France now, which again is another inspiring move. I mean, I just went half an hour down the road and it freaked the bejesus out of me just moving counties. So in awe of your moving and upping six to a complete different country with a different culture and everything that brings. But I know that your kids are teenagers now, right?
The eldest is 12.
Yeah, pre-teens.
And the youngest is 8. They act like teenagers.
Exactly, because they're so in a hurry to get places that I have the same thing with my 12-year-old. So I know that your journey would have been quite a while ago now, but that is still I still think it's really pertinent. So was that a good enough introduction?
It's perfect.
Is there anything else you would add to that?
So I don't know where to start the story, but I guess it might be relevant to start it around the pregnancy piece. So
yes.
I think that's when I first found out I was pregnant, which it wasn't planned. It really hit me like badly, and I didn't know that at the time I was suffering something called tocophobia. So I didn't know this. I only found out much later, and so I hit a real pit of despair, and it was horrid. And then within a few weeks I miscarried at about 7 or 8 weeks, and then I experienced huge relief, and that made me really flip out a bit, because it was like, hang on a minute, why am I experiencing relief at a miscarriage? This isn't normal. I'm a little bit like, I've lost it, clearly. There's something really wrong with me. What's going on? And I didn't know where to go with that, because I'd not heard of tocophobia. I didn't know that was a thing. But I knew that I clearly must be in a mess mentally. So I needed to deal with all the stresses and severe anxiety that I was clearly suffering from, probably depressive episodes. I'd not long lost my mum, tragically, very suddenly, to cancer. She was, when we found out, when we lost her, was 6 weeks. It was a very kind of traumatic experience that really kind of sent me more on my personal development journey, I guess. So I really started clearing my fears, anxieties that just make me feel a little bit more okay, so that when I fell pregnant again a year later, I didn't feel this pit. I was like, oh, okay, I can do this now. And but I was still terrified. And I thought my birth plan at the outset was C-section, all the drugs, knock me out, don't want to be conscious, like I don't want to even be present for this, just take the baby out of me in any way you can. And now as a birth professional, I kind of go, oh, it horrified me to hear that, but that was where I was. And then I realized my fears were so severe that I really needed to sort this out, because I had a timeline that wasn't movable and I really needed to resolve it. So I thought I'll try and clear my own fears, because I had tried hypnobirthing, which just wasn't doing anything for me. It just didn't hit the sides. It kind of just felt like, well, this is just a total waste of time. And that's because my fears are so deep and phobia. Hypnobirthing isn't going to touch the sides with phobias. And then I thought, I really got to sort this out. So I took, having trained in lots of things up until that point, I decided to try and do this myself. So I decided to clear my own fears, And yeah, so I focused on that. I mapped out all my fears, wrote them all out. And for 3 months in my middle trimester, I just cleared everything.
Wow.
Using this process that I kind of brought together with stuff that I'd previously learned. And yeah, and in month 7 or 8, I decided to ditch the C-section plan for home birth.
Wow.
And that, yes, I clearly got to a place now. I was like, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I did. I had an amazing 8-hour pain-free home birth.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. And a huge relief. But at the time I thought, well, you've just fluked it, right? I didn't know that anything I'd done was what I did. How do I know? The only way I'm really going to know is I've got to test it by doing it again.
Yeah. You cleared yourself.
Just have another baby. Yeah. So I parked all that work really. And then baby number 2 showed up 4 years later and none of the fears were there anymore. The work had stuck. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But now I'm an older mum and I've got different fears. And I've also got the consultants telling me, you know, your placenta's going to die at 38 weeks. So we're going to induce you and all those ridiculous stories you hear. So I had new sets of fears this time around, but I continued with the fear clearance stuff. And when my baby was born this time, it wasn't just a sort of enjoyable, pain-free, it was euphoric. It was incredible.
Wow.
It was the kind of experience now that whenever I think about it, I just get really emotional and just like life-changing. Yeah. In a kind of really powerful, all the great things that birth can be. That was mine. Even now I'm getting goosebumps just
it's making me feel really,
I know and so then I was like, hang on a minute, there's something in this, right? So then I was going to write a book to share the technique, but not to the pregnancy audience, to the business audience. I was a business coach. So I started writing my book and my aunt said, she's my spiritual mentor, she went, you really need to write a book for pregnant women. I was like, what? Why would I do that? That's a ridiculous idea. Who's going to want to read this? You know, I work with business coach, like guys, like, you know, I was working with leaders of like men, alpha male men of business owners who ran, you know, big companies kind of thing. So this seemed like a ridiculous idea, but I don't know. So start getting emails from people who'd heard about my births. And I don't know how they heard about my births. They're like, how did you do it? And I was like, so I'm emailing them with, you know, baby on boob, writing stuff. I was like, and it was quite a long email because I had to explain how I'd broken the fear down and pulled it apart, which needs a bit of explaining. And then my technique, which needed a bit of explaining. And that's how I was writing all these emails to these women I didn't know, but they were pregnant and desperate and they wanted to know because they were terrified. So, and I remember saying, if I get another one of these damn emails, I'm going to write a freaking book. And then I got another email. I was like, shit. I'd not half written it, but you know, all these emails were kind of good starting points. So within 3 months, I spent the first 3 months, like from when my baby was 1 month to 4 months, just writing. Wow. And I finished with 108,000 words. Wow. Which has become the book Fearless Birthing. Yay! Which is a bit of a tome, actually. I probably should edit it down, but and then I was like, well, what do I do with this? You know, your business coach with men as your clients, like, this doesn't work with your personal brand at all. Because I'm kind of a marketing person, and it didn't. And I thought, I'll just start a podcast on maternity. Yeah, and they'll never find out, these guys, because they're not going to listen to a pregnancy podcast. So I did, and shared initial, you know, some of the concepts in the book, and the podcast went insane. Wow. Really early on. And at the time I had my Head Trash podcast, which had already won awards and was at the top of the charts. Amazing. But this podcast just eclipsed the Head Trash show. But it never hit the top of the charts because I was competing with brands like Sesame Street and Nickelodeon podcasts, and, you know, like massive brands. Yeah. So I never really saw any any indicators that it was a successful podcast, but the numbers were just smashing it. Phenomenal. And you know, I hit 10,000 listens a month. Yeah, that's incredible. Up to a peak of 20-25 downloads a month. Wow. When I was publishing, which just blew my mind. You know. And I did a petition against One Born Every Minute because I felt that they were really promoting fear around birth. And it wasn't really to kind of ban them or do anything like pull it off air. It was really just to sort of use it as an opportunity to educate and inform and provide context to some of the births that the women were observing, because I could see that show was very damaging to women. It is. And the press picked it up, and next thing you know, I'm on 5 Live. I mean, in the Daily Mail, it just went crazy, and everyone thought I was the woman that tried to ban One Born. So I got a load of vicious vitriol online for that, which was an interesting experience. So that kind of the beast that is the Fearfully Childbirth brand just kind of
snowballed.
It just kind of went a little bit crazy. And
I
realized as well that, you know, women who are pregnant or preparing for pregnancy don't necessarily value that in a monetary sense. They're happy to pay off for a pram or a childcare seat. They're not necessarily, they don't value the importance of emotional well-being and how you prepare. And so when I was used to having business coaching rates, and suddenly I'm trying to sell to a very different market that doesn't pay in the same way, I was like, oh, this isn't working. But it's so important. How do I reconcile? So it forced me to go very digital. And the great thing about my method is it works. It's a DIY method, so people can heal their own stuff, because I clearly did it. And I could create audios, because what I did in the beginning for my own pregnancy is I created audio tracks, because I didn't have a therapist. So I became my own therapist by recording myself. And listening to my own voice. So then I could sell these as well. So I started creating lots of tools and digital and online ways that women could benefit from my work without me. So that they could be empowered and manage their own mental health. So so that kind of all kind of consumed me. I decided to park my head trash brand at that point, because there was clearly demand, and it's really important for me. It felt like birth is the moment that if you can get that bit right, everything ripples from that, doesn't it? It's, you know, the mother's life, the partner's life, the family life, the child, it all starts from that birth experience. And if you can get that right, my goodness, you can solve a lot of the world's ills, I think. So it felt like a bit of a calling to really take this to as many people as possible, and to make it easily accessible, so that you didn't have to work with me privately to access it. You could actually just buy a track for like $19 or whatever it is, and just access it. And then I had some doulas and midwives and birth therapists that wanted to train, because they wanted to work using that method. And the great thing about it is you can use it in birth. So I was clearing my fears in labour.
As
in between contractions.
You
know, and you don't know what, you know, even though you might clear all your stuff ahead of time, stuff's going on in labour.
You're always responding to your environment, always.
Exactly.
That's how you know, that's how comes any therapy is not a one-shot thing, and that's why finding something that can work is so important, because life happens and we're always responding in different ways, and fear is a natural response to anything that puts us outside of our comfort zone, anything that makes us feel threatened. You know, it's part of our human existence. So being able to have something that you can use to move with it, to work with it, to know it, to, you know, is so, I mean, it's just it's a life skill, right?
Oh, totally. And I love the fact that if a woman decides that she wants to learn that, then she's in charge of her own well-being in the birth space. She doesn't need anybody to be there for her, even though obviously that's what we as women we want. It allows her to be, you know, entirely kind of in control of that situation herself, which, as you know, that it's the feeling of loss of control of your emotions in a birth that can lead to birth trauma. So by giving her a sense of empowerment, feeling empowered, like she's got the power, she's got the control, she's making the decisions, and also by enabling a woman to reduce that anxiety stress response in labor, means she's much more clear-headed, she can make a decision that she can live with and not regret later, and kind of go, no, actually, okay, this might have now become an emergency C-section, but I want the lights down. I want this, and she's regaining control in that space. Rather than feeling like the whole situation's running off, run away, and she's lost the control. Which is the beginnings of trauma. So for me, I feel it's a really important tool that can really serve women well. But then if the doula is trained in it, or the midwife, then she can just use it on the woman, even though the woman's not. You know, by having anybody in that birth space who knows it, they can really act very quickly to bring that woman back to a really good place. So it, you know, I stayed doing it in that sector for so long, because it just felt like such important work.
It really does.
But then we decided to move countries, and then COVID. And then, you know, my kids are like, 6, 7 at that point. And I was like, I'm getting really bored of this. Should I get an epidural question? I'm like, I was just kind of getting a little bit bored of that birth topic, even though the fear, the mindset and the psychology of it, I still find really interesting. I just wanted to do a little bit more. And I knew my tool, my technique could be used in so many different ways, because I've been using it on my own mindset for my business, to grow my business and do all the things, overcome all my own head trash of doing what I needed to do for my business. So I started getting some people on Facebook, you know, come to me, go, oh, you know, would it work on my business fears? I'm like, hell yeah. So I started doing loads of business stuff with people, and gently pivoting away from the birth stuff, and noticing that when I blended head trash clearance with business, I was like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, working with people to really overcome their selling blocks, being visible, all those things. I was like, well, this is really interesting. And since, I mean, like, I'm working with somebody at the moment who's got problems with show jumping and riding their horse. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about horse riding. I'm allergic to them. She went, no, I know, but like, I think it's really going to work. I think I read your work. And, because the technique uses opposites, that it's the principles of the law of opposites. And she said, because the thing is, what I love more than anything is to ride my horse and jump with my horse. But what I hate more than anything in the world is riding my horse and jumping my horse. I was like,
but this is what I love about working with fear. It's about acknowledging the duality of experience, and there's so much in that. And we're so encouraged as we grow up, often by our own sort of experience of parenting, to avoid sensation of fear and excitement, to avoid it, either have something to eat, have something to drink, run away from it, or to not be present with the actual sensation of fear or excitement. And to the degree that when we do encounter real fears in our life, we don't really know what to do with the sensation of it, and how to work with it, or how to move with it, or how to use different modalities, different NLP techniques that can clear those things away and can create space for something new. So but it's how we ultimately will grow in life, is to be able to know it, to acknowledge it, to move with it. Otherwise, we're just always going to stay stuck. We're always going to be dodging it, avoiding it, stuffing it down with food or alcohol, or just staying really, really small and not really kind of maneuvering too much. This is so important to know the duality of that experience.
Yeah, totally. And so I started moving a little bit away from the birth stuff, and I realized that I really thought business and taking this into corporate could be really interesting. So I started getting a lot of people from corporates and they think, oh, well, my team, could you work this on my team? So sort of looking at all of that. So and just as all that was happening, then we were like without a home in France. The rental agreement ran out. We needed to sell the UK house. We couldn't visit anywhere because we were in lockdown. It was all like life hit at that point. And so then I'm in a house that's really a rental, that's a horrid house, that's got no heating and it's freezing and there's no internet, and then we need to sell the house and move, and so I sort of hit my own dark night of the soul, for want of a better word, where suddenly we found ourselves without a home, without living out the suitcase in an Airbnb, renewing it by the week, and I was really struggling with that. My whole sense of stability, of foundation, had really kind of been taken away, and that just brought up a whole new level of
fear,
basically. And I realized that it was monumental. It really was. And I thought, my God, I've really got to go deeper with my own healing here, because it's calling to be done. And rather than kind of, I'm always somebody that tried to do it myself. I cleared my fears before myself. I'm gonna clear my unresolved traumas. Yes, let's go and do that. So I started kind of figuring out ways of healing my trauma and testing and going deeper and just really feeling my way through that and getting intuitive hits, channeling down, however you want to express that. Stuff was just coming to me, and I was like, right, I'll try that. And then I get these huge releases. I've spent half an hour crying doing the clearance. I was like, wow, this is really shifting stuff. So about a year ago, I spent 3, 4, 5 months developing a trauma healing process, which I then started working more with one-to-one people. I got some difficult to test the trauma process, but I had people volunteering. They're like,
no, people do. So, I find I've never had any problems, with either having clients or finding case studies, because people very often have tried a lot of things that haven't worked, and we're sort of really entering a new age of understanding trauma, understanding how it impacts our mental and emotional health. And I sort of feel that actually it's part of life, right? It's part of life for us to experience incredible difficulties at different times. We'll all experience loss. We'll all experience, things like you have, even something is sort of fairly commonplace as moving house can really take away your foundations and leave you, you know, feeling very insecure, and bring up a lot of stuff that perhaps you thought had been dealt with. And yeah, I think when people resonate with your experience and with when you can very clearly say how it is you've moved through something, then people are drawn to that, and people think, no, I think that will work for me. When you were describing it earlier, and I had the same thing with 3-Step Rewind, I was able to describe it as a process in a way that other therapeutic techniques, they can't do that. They can't describe what happens. And I say this a lot to my students, you know, there's not really a lot of room for error. It's a very clear process, way of working, but it's very unique, that will be very unique to each individual, but it is a process, you know, and that appeals to people because they can understand it. Then there's no grey areas. There's no like, oh, let's wait and see what happens and hope it turns out for the best. We kind of can say that this is how it works, and it does.
Yeah. So I had lots of people I was practicing, and they were noticing some real shifts, and I thought, well, this is really interesting. And there's always been something in me about creating something that can scale, and you can heal a lot of people at once, rather than forcing people to have one-to-one sessions that not everybody can afford. Is enabling people that can't afford that to access that kind of support, because I think mental health is just out of control right now, and with everything we've gone through in the last 3 years, it's only going to get worse. So keeping it in that one-to-one professional therapist space, I don't think it's the right. I think to go to a place where you can empower people and enable them to heal themselves, because actually all healing starts within anyway. Yeah. The therapist or the coach or whoever is merely facilitating that.
You're just shining a light.
Exactly. They're not the one that does the healing. The healing comes from within.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's about really giving more power to the person, so then that they can create that for themselves. And of course, there are going to be more complex bits they might want some help with. But essentially, you know, with the head trash method, people can just heal their stuff themselves. And so I really wanted them to be able to access that. I was wondering, could I do this with the trauma thing? Could I enable more people at once to access it? So I started doing some group healings over the back end of last year, and I decided to tackle key childhood themes, like childhood wounds, you know, the inner child stuff, rejection, abandonment, you know, those kind of classics that we've all got, right?
Yes.
And people were like, oh my God, this is just, I'm getting so many, like, I'm letting go of so much stuff. And they were just all kind of not crying, but having big releases in group sessions. And I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Incredible.
So then I started getting more people wanting one-to-one work. So I think I spent the last 4 or 5 months just solidly doing trauma healing, which has been so interesting for me, having not focused specifically on that. Before, and learned so much, but seeing how it really moves the needle on people. And when I think about head trash, I mean, the head trash method is very potent already, the basic version, but this trauma healing aspect has just taken it to a whole new level. But and I became aware, I don't know if you're aware of the tool, the Map of Consciousness by David R. Hawkins. Measures, he has measurements of frequency and vibrations. And I decided to start taking calibrations of myself at various points in my life. And to see what was increasing expanding my consciousness, and what was lowering it down. What was interesting on that pregnancy journey, when I first found out I was pregnant, is finding out I was pregnant initially dropped my consciousness, and then getting the miscarriage, it lifted again. So it kind of was able to recover. And then all that anxiety clearance I did, it increased. And I was able to draw a correlation between using my head trash method and a change in my consciousness. I was like, well, this is interesting. When I took a reading of me a year ago doing lots of intense trauma healing, my consciousness just leapt. I was like, wow, this is nuts. Because the guy came up with the tool, said if you jump 5 points in a lifetime, that's pretty rare. And I was jumping hundreds. So I was like, so I decided to come up with a program for people that were just interested in raising consciousness. Like, normally it's like 10x your revenue, or like, you know, like find confidence or become more visible in your business. Things that from a business coaching perspective, I could stand behind that, you know, and I could people are going to buy that, right? They want that. But who's going to expand their consciousness? And I was gobsmacked, actually, when I put it out there, I sold out within a couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about things like energy work, vibration and consciousness raising, you are hailing a very particular audience. I mean, I know I said earlier on, I know nothing about marketing, and it's something that I really struggle with in my business, but I think one of the things that's really important for all of us, people in this space who are creating our own programs, and potentially supporting people who are perhaps vulnerable, who are suffering, who are genuinely, they've got trauma and they're vulnerable because of that. I think it's really, really super important that we are able to say who this is for. And in saying that, we really quickly identify who it's not for. And I think when you start talking about things like this is the thing of this program, it will raise your consciousness, then very automatically you're talking to people who are aware of that as a concept. There are lots of people are unaware of that. They don't even know what that is. And they're unaware of energy work, and they're unaware of vibration and all of the things that go with that. So I think even just talking about it in that way really hones your audience to say.
And I've got people now that want to train in this method in my trauma healing. So I'm like, okay, well, so I've got to write the sales page. Like, and as I've been really giving that a lot of thought, I realize there's a lot of healing approaches around trauma that are specifically really, and I think when I've come into that area, you think about trauma, a lot of people think about trauma as being that one-off thing that's happened, like the car crash, the divorce, the loss.
Yes.
They think about which is referred to as acute trauma. And then you've got complex trauma, which is just like a multitude of that.
Yes.
But there's lots of techniques that do that. And there are lots of professionals that specialize in that. And I don't want to compete, not compete, but
that's not you. Yeah, that's not it. Yeah.
And it will do that because I've used that on my own birth trauma. So it does do that. But what I find really interesting about this approach is that I've identified how to work with, so coming at it from a different way, is you can be having all the signs of unresolved trauma, so addiction, lower self-esteem, confidence issues, like sabotage on a massive scale, whatever it is, but you might not have any event in your life that you can go acute trauma or complex, and then when you don't have any obvious trauma
to hang it on, or there's lots of things, or it was a very long period that was difficult.
And so if you can't point to an event, because we've been led to think that trauma is this event,
a single event that's a defined time,
or even like, my parent, like my dad beat me up, or whatever, those kind of that maybe happened over many years. If we haven't come from that kind of background, you can look at your life and go, well, why the hell am I like this?
Absolutely.
And where do they what do those people do when they're like, well, I've clearly got unresolved trauma, but I don't know what the trauma is? And that's where this approach really comes into its own, because I'm approaching it not by event, which it can be done for that, but by theme. And so by working with themes, like using took lead from the child wounds, the abandonment, rejection, what we're able to do then is gather all those experiences that even those micro traumas, those little moments where somebody stood you up on a date, or your parents lost you in the supermarket, or whatever, they on their own and don't really seem like anything. But then the first time it happened, you came up with a belief.
Yes, exactly. You could name the first time it happened. So less like memories in the sense that they play out perhaps like a film might, or like, have an X, Y, and Z to them. And they're more like representations in your mind, because they're things that happened over and over and over and over again. So there was 100 times that you were let down by your parents, for example, or there was 100 times where you felt threatened by your brother, for example, or whatever it might be. There's not one distinct memory, but it was just something that happened over a period of time that is probably a representation somewhere in your psyche.
I realized by approaching it that way, and the other thing that I realized as well very quickly is that a lot of these traumas, we kind of think, well, we've got this unresolved trauma from the life that I've lived here in this lifetime. And because of my work in birth, I already was very knowledgeable about prenatal psychology and how actually there's a lot of stuff happening in utero that can really feed into this. So I automatically brought in the in utero experience as part of the healing, but then the past life aspect and ancestral aspect as well, which what I've found is a lot of people are dealing with unresolved stuff that's not even from
didn't even start with them, as to name the book. It didn't start with them. The transgenerational trauma is huge. It's
absolutely huge. So yeah, the process now is very multi-layered, and it works with the aspects of stuff that we know that creates trauma in, you know, when you're having an experience, you know, the feeling of not having any escape and loss of control. So those aspects and the people involved. So if there are any events from the current life, but also going deeper into the past life, the ancestral, the in utero as well, and just bringing all that together into kind of one process, which which is kind of is with the people that signed up for this consciously thing, is just clearly, it's just knocking stuff out of the park. I'm just like, wow, I need this program. So yeah,
what happens? I'm just sort of playing a little bit of devil's avocado here, because this sometimes happens with clients that I support. They come wanting a certain outcome and thinking, you know, if trauma is released or lifted, if those symptoms are kind of gone, then I can finally do X, Y, or Z. I can finally meet the man of my dreams, build my business, whatever it might be, whatever their goal might be, and they come with a goal, an end in mind, which isn't a bad thing. But actually then they clear their trauma and they create space, and their life's changing in other ways that they didn't predict. So, you know, actually they decide to like, you know, stop their business and go off in a different, you know, emigrate to Australia, or do you know what I mean? What would you say to those kinds of experiences when people kind of think that they want to work with their trauma because they think that it's standing in their way of something that they want, but actually when they get to that point they're like, oh, I didn't want that?
I've had that quite a lot, actually, not just with the trauma stuff, but before, when I was doing clearance stuff, just using head trash clearances, they think that they need all that stuff, they clear it and realize they didn't want a coaching business after all.
No.
And actually they've just sunk more north of 30 grand on training and Yeah. And actually that's not going to make them happy. They were chasing it for all the wrong reasons. And we've managed to just clear an epic piece of sabotage and get them back on a track in life that that makes them happy. So if they go and end up doing things like that and they revert back to their North Star, that's fine, because they're like, oh my goodness, this is such relief. I was chasing it and I was struggling with it, and actually I realized I just don't want this. Yeah. So that's always come through as a positive experience for me. But whenever I work with people, I don't necessarily, I tune into them and I'm guided. So they say they want X, Y, Z, and I'm going, okay, that's really interesting, and we can do that. But I'm also going to test it into what your higher self is asking for, and I'm going to share that with you, and then you can make a decision whether you want to go with what your higher self is asking for or what your ego wants. And I'll do whatever you want, but I just want you to know that there might be an alternative route we could take here. And very quickly they go, no, let's do what the higher self wants, let's do what which might take us down a very different road. But then they trust that, and then it's about, where's this road going to lead, and it usually ends in great places for them, because they've gone where it was fear that was making them go down another road. It was an old idea and wanting to please their other half, or doing it for how it looks, you know, whatever those reasons might have been. They weren't doing it for their greater good. And I think ultimately people do want to work for things that are going to make them happy, right?
I think as soon as you really realise the illusion of the ego, and I mean, I've had to do so much work around this because I've got a very strident ego, that really can keep my higher self and my subconscious will, like my subconscious will's just you know, and all of the inner child stuff that goes with that. I can just really create a lot of self-sabotage, unconscious self-sabotage. So I've had to really double down on that, because I've gone along down a path for a long time thinking that this is where I'm heading, and then as I've begin to integrate other parts, it really has been a case of like, oh, that whole thing that was the focus of everything is now gone. Where am I? What am I doing?
I know I had a lot of that over the last year, where I was like, my head wanted to do I've got to do the corporate stuff because this makes sense. It's going to be good.
And your ego's going, no, this is the way.
It's a really good idea. And then, but my heart kept going, go back, heal a trauma. I was like, but that's not going to give me any money. And then lo and behold, it's new training, people seeking it out, like suddenly it kind of, it was going to, and actually that's where I needed to go. And
it's in total alignment.
It's actually where I needed to be. And so I trusted, every time I got an intuitive hit to heal another trauma, I'd be like, like dragging myself over to the bed again to kind of do that, rather than sit, do work. And actually, really, when you want to expand on or follow your path, be on your path, which is what I want to be, is allowing your intuition to lead the road, not you, because your intuition knows exactly what's required. And it's just about you being able to listen to it and act on it, not listen to it and then ignore it, but listen to it and take action.
Yes.
And often the action requires overcoming fears and go, well, that's going to sound silly.
Yeah. Or I can't do it, or it's too big, or I don't know how. How do I get there?
And the disclaimer, I have not nailed any of this at all. I'm still a work in progress. So I'm not like, I'm still like dealing with my own head rush, dealing with my own traumas and working all this stuff. And I've realized that the more you clear, the more you're pushing yourself and do things that you wouldn't have done before. Like moving countries, would I just, there's no way I could have done that if I'd not worked on myself so much, because it brought up so much. And especially with the pandemic going on, it was kind of trying on lots of levels. But I think it's because the more inner work you do, the more you can do things like that and get you. And now I'm living and the crazy thing is I'm living in a part of France I'd never been here before. My aunt, who's French, she said, oh, but you've always wanted to live there ever since you were a child. And I was like, really? And the only reason we're living here is because our first house in France fell through. And I went on Facebook going, oh, somebody help. And somebody who I just interviewed about grief on my Fear Free Childhood page went, oh yeah, we know somebody. I know somebody, she's French. I know somebody, they've got a house they might be able to rent. And suddenly we're in this part of France. And it just, we didn't choose it. We were brought here, And it was, but coming onto Facebook and like admitting that my whole life had just fallen apart again, I was like, oh my God, I'm trying to like do like, look like I'm super cool and oh look, she's gone to France. No, it's really not going that well here.
I really do feel that from you though as well. I feel like I think sometimes I certainly feel like on the one hand, I have a duty to have this sort of perception as somebody who's got my shit together, does yoga 4 times a week, eats meat minimally, and all of those things. But actually the truth of it is that I'm just a hot mess, struggling to find my way through. And I think this came up in one of my groups the other day. I said I really don't like oversharing, but when I can get myself to a place of sharing vulnerably about what I'm actually feeling, what I'm actually experiencing, then not only do I receive so much support, which often does carry you up and lift you in directions that you hadn't anticipated, but it's I don't know, it's authentic, isn't it? It's authentic to be able to, I'm very suspicious of people who are just blue sky and and I think for me it was always been a dream. We've been talking about it for ages to come to France and to be able to kind of make that happen. Part of me is like, well, I've got to build the business up. The build's got a 6-figure business, and then we can go to France. And it's like, no, I'm going to do this now, not wait to make it happen. I think there's a lesson there in waiting to be happy. I'll be happy when I've done X, Y, Z. No, like do it now. We know lots of people here that come here to retire, and I'm like, well, I don't need to retire because I'm like, I'm here already, kind of thing. And I just get so much from that every day that like, it was really hard. And my goodness, I'm so grateful for that now. I'm like, what next? Now what's next for the dream kind of thing? But knowing that you can kind of achieve your dream is a real kind of confidence boost. And knowing, and knowing that you can pivot as well, I think, and knowing that it still honors your own sort of creativity and your own soul in the way that it develops and evolves and moves, like, and it has, you've had one thing and it's grown into another thing and it's gone into another thing, and no doubt it will continue to grow as you continue to learn from it yourself, which I think is a really beautiful thing. I think very often, we've both discovered formulas or ways of working with something that are very effective, are very gentle, and therefore very popular with people. They work, which is really good. But in a way, sometimes that can also feel a bit limiting. And for me, I totally understand what you're saying about, I'm a bit like over that now. I kind of not sure I can have another conversation about this thing again that I'm used to talking about. I could probably talk about it in my sleep if I was asked to. And so I think it's really important to be able to honour your own creativity, your own desire to go to other places, to sort of grow. The thing that people love is still always there and still always available for you. But hopefully there's lots of other things that kind of come out of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important as well for other people working in this space to have that permission to follow their own intuition. And it's such a shame, isn't it, that we don't have, that we're not taught those kinds of skills as we grow up, that we you know, we kind of are much more told to listen to our egocentric kind of way, inner voices and experiences than get quiet and tune into intuition and follow it.
Yeah, I know, as a mother, that's really interesting, watching how kids are getting taught and trying to incorporate that into how they make decisions and getting them to tune in, because you're right, we don't learn that. We switch that off from an early age. Yeah, and it's really limiting. And
I think you've got like a real window as well with it, because by the time they get to 10, 11, 12, you can see how, especially with social media, which you know, we really never wanted our children to have, but kind of happened over COVID because of connectivity and everything else. You can really see how that's kind of taken something, and you know, then looking to reconnect, because everybody does have that naturally. Like, you know, you talk to younger children, 6, 7, 8, 9, they have that intuition, and they'll follow it. But it's
it gets dulled down. And then the screens, I mean, the COVID thing has really made screens more prominent in the home, and it's just, how do you get them off that?
Once it's there, it's really, you know,
it's really hard, especially when, like, you know, we're using as adults, but you might, you know, you're doing a lot more as an adult. You're checking your bank account or whatever it is you're doing, you're using it in lots of ways, and they're just on games. It makes it very difficult to kind of put back in, you know, human connection, playing outside, getting dirty, like all that, you know, really important.
Especially when they get older and they, you know, they want to be a part of those online spaces as well, you know, because part of that is about being independent from you and having something that's theirs that you're not observing, watching, being a part of. And so I kind of get all of those, but it's really hard, you know, and so we've had to put in like boundaries around time usage that I've had to honor myself. So, you know, I've had to, not only do their phones get put away at 6 o'clock, I have to put mine away at 6 o'clock as well. You know, because you've got to practice what you preach. But I mean, it's I think that's possibly the worst thing to come out of COVID for young people's mental health is screen time, and the way that
the wonderful thing in France, they're really against phone, like, they're just, because they're behind on all of that. They don't use computers at school. So when I try and email the teacher, she's like, oh, no, I don't use the computer. No, they're using boards, and they're not allowed mobile phones at school. Like, I'm like, this is great, you know. So actually, there's a really good benefit to being in the culture here that's a little bit slow on all of that, and really dismissive of it, because they're really valuing real interactions and real meeting and all of that. So there's this, you know, back to the opposites, isn't it? Like having that duality is actually really
that's a good thing. I love it. Oh, it's been so good talking to you. I feel like we could do a part 2 easily, and I just didn't ask you any of my questions at all.
Oh, did you?
One question I would like to ask you before we go is something that I think I think would help other professionals who perhaps get to hear this, or maybe even parents. But when you transition from being a parent who healed herself to being a professional coach, like what supported you in that transition? Obviously you were like, well, this is working for myself, and you were supporting people over email, and then at some point you were like, right, okay, I've got enough content here for a book, it's going to be a book. Was there anything else apart from your own program that supported you to make that transition? Did you yourself hire a coach, for example, or were there any books that you read that really so I remember when I made my transition, I read the book Playing Big with Tara Mohr, I'm never sure on the pronunciation of the name, Mohr. It was a really good book for people looking to make that leap. And it was just a book, but I think, you know, actually a lot of things that have supported me have been books, actually, more so than perhaps expensive training or coaching or anything like that. I just wondered, because obviously, you know, you have your own process that you have developed and evolved that is uniquely yours, but what were the things that supported you to make those transitions and to get there?
Well, when I quit my marketing job at the financial crisis in 2008. So I was coaching. So I started off as a personal brand coach, then a business leadership coach. So I was doing that when I fell pregnant. So I already had a coaching business, and then when I started I worked with my own pregnancy stuff, then it was really, I'd already started incorporating mindset into my work. So I studied NLP, I've studied TFT. So I was already blending coaching with mindset, because I realized that, if you're helping somebody with their marketing and building their brand, if they don't believe in their brand vision and who they can be, it doesn't matter. You can do all the social media marketing in the world and it's not going to work. So mindset was forming already quite an important part of my work. So it wasn't a million leaps for me to just find a new niche, for want of a better word. And what was really interesting is I didn't really have a niche. I just kind of ended up working with alpha male leaders of businesses of like 10 to 20 people. Those are the guys and they were very lonely at the top. So it's really helping them, being the CEO and working. And also, so the niche I had, they were marketing agencies mainly, because of my background in marketing. So that was who I was working with. And then suddenly the birth thing really offered an opportunity to have a very, very clearly defined niche, which I hadn't had before. And I was like, oh, and so all my marketing training really kicked in. I was like, oh, I can work with this, because now it's like, but actually, how wrong was I? I thought that I'd be working with fearful pregnant women, because that's what you think, right?
The tocophobics.
I would say 80%, 90% of my clients aren't pregnant. They can't even get pregnant, because they're so terrified. A lot of the people that are pregnant and moderately fearful will be using my online courses and the online stuff that doesn't involve me. But actually the people I work with are those that are super, super terrified.
Severe.
So when I first decided to offer a tocophobic, and I just said, I made it really clear that I was like trying it out, and it was a low price, and we'll see how this goes. I'm not making any guarantees. And then obviously getting results. So the next time I'd launch it a bit more, and then I'd increase the price gradually as I was getting more results in. And so it was very kind of, I knew my process worked DIY, but working with other tocophobic women, I wasn't sure how that was going to work, because it's a very complex condition, and a lot of therapists don't understand it. A lot of women come to me.
It's very deep. Very childhood trauma very often.
Nobody's figured it out. And so they come to me going, I've tried CBT, I've tried this, I've tried that. And the therapist doesn't know what it is. So I think what I bring to it is the knowledge of what it's like to go through that, but also having, because of the approach, the head trash approach, it is about writing out the things that you're fearful of and working them through them one by one. It's dead simply write out a list and you clear it. You just go, you work on your to-do list. But that forces you to break down the fear. Like, what is it about birth?
What is it
that I'm fearful? What is it? Is it the fear of loss of control? Is it the fear of feeling trapped? What is it? And once you kind of pull the granular, that's why my head trash logo is so perfect, because it's our fears are just like this plate of spaghetti. You have to pull each strand out.
You have to get
the knots. You can't just deal with the whole thing in one go. So but a lot of the therapists don't know what are the typical strands you need to look for. So I think that I bring that to my work, and I only got that through just loads of experience and
practice.
Exactly. So I think it's just about trying and being really open with people. Look, this is you. And it worked for me. And actually that's enough. People were like, oh my God, it worked for you. Great. And that's enough. I've got a client at the moment, and she's like, well, it's so new. I don't know anybody who uses this. I'm like, well, I know, but it's mine. I haven't got it out in the world. Like oh, but it is new. And that's it's just being really open about that, rather than hoodwinking people or like hiding it.
Exactly.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I really appreciate that. I mean, and I had a similar experience. I mean, my process, it was different in that I hadn't personally experienced it working on me. I just experienced it working on loads of other people. So I almost had to pull apart my experience to know what it was. And it was only in teaching it to people that I did that. I was like, right, I've got to break it down step by step by step. What is it I'm doing and why does it work? And so that was, but again, similarly, being honest and open and saying, well, this is what works for me. I've been using this with my clients. It seems to be really effective. Maybe it'll work for you. And then as I taught it more and more and more, I got more feedback from them. And they're like, oh yeah, no, it does work. But what about this? What about that? And there was like a sort of snag list of like, what happens if they've got this, this and this? And so having to kind of, you know, extrapolate out these strands and everything else. But definitely practice is, and that's why I teach the way I do. I teach practical skills and techniques. They're very NLP hypnotherapeutically driven, that pull apart a process and allow you to kind of work with a framework, which is is what people want, and what I think is lacking from a lot of other, perhaps BACP counsel, you know, other kind of more well-known kind of therapeutic approaches, which don't generally have great track records for lifting trauma fast.
Yeah, and I know I've had people asking me, even the people in my private clients, saying, can you just explain to me why this works? And it's sometimes it's like, you know, if you kind of not channeled it, but it's been intuitively created, you don't know why, you just got the guidance.
Absolutely not 100%, no. And I think also sometimes it works on many different levels. You know, I used to be able to explain how rewind works. Well, it's a repatterning, you know, it makes the brain you know, have a left and right movement which repatterns the neuro pathways that are holding trauma in place, so this movement breaks them and it creates space, and I can explain that. But actually, in truth, there are so many other aspects to therapeutic support. There's trust and rapport. If you haven't got that, nothing's going anywhere. So if you haven't got that relationship, it doesn't matter what technique you're using, you're probably not going to get very far with any of them unless people trust you and have rapport with you. And that, you know, that's something that again only comes with practice. You know, I think listening and being able to listen to the language patterns that people use is really important. Unless we're able to really understand how someone understands their problem, then we can't pull apart that ball. It's almost like I have to get into somebody else's head and see the world from the way they do, in order to know how to unpick that. And that for me is about listening to the language that they use and the metaphors and the quirks of phrase and everything else that they're using to describe their experience. And so it's really multi-leveled, and I think people really want one answer. They want to say, like, tell me exactly what is it. It's like, well, it's lots of things, and I've put them together like this, and this bit's good for this and this bit's good, and without any of it probably doesn't work, and it is a bit more complex than perhaps what we make it seem when we practice.
But I think having a way of explaining things to people is really important, because some people need that to be able to, you know, that they are kind of over rational thing, you know, they're kind of that part of their mind brain is really active, and they won't let it in if they don't have a knowledge about it. So I found that, like, I've been asked for the trauma training for a good sort of 6 months, and I'm like, ever since I first came out, I was like, I'm not ready to train it, because I need to get to know it better. I need to find a structure to present it. I need to kind of understand why am I doing that, and I'm only going to get that from experience. So every now and then I have to kind of, like, you know, step back and go, why is this working, and maybe consult some trauma material out there to kind of, because I'm not trained. Like, the other thing that really that kind of undermines my own confidence sometimes is the fact that my background is marketing and business. I am not trained in psychotherapy. I'm not, you know, I don't have a psychology degree. I did consumer behavior, but that's still marketing, right? So I don't come here with loads of social work under my belt, or all the qualifications that you would expect from somebody who's now got a modality. And yet I've got therapists that want to train with me because they're getting results that they've not had with what they've trained in for 10 years. It's
very gratifying, isn't it?
And so they want me to tell them why it's working. I'm like, well, you probably know more about why it's working than me. And I had one client, and she was brilliant. She you know, I love people that really dive in head first. They go, right, I'm going to try this. With both feet, I'm just going to go for it. Rather than those that are like, oh, does it work?
I don't know.
And she just went straight, and she had a psychology degree. She got all this. So she wrote me a massive email going, do you want to know why your technique works? Here you go. And I was like,
brilliant. That's what you want to have someone else tell you. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I've kind of worked that out piece by piece, just listening back to people. One thing that really helped me was when I started videoing for my online courses, when I started videoing case studies, but to show other people what it was I was doing. Then I watched it back, and I could see what bits and how they were working. I could really break it down. And so, although it's horrible watching myself, I hate watching myself. And I'm fine with watching myself. I really hate listening to myself. I've got this like thing, like, now I'm talking, I'm all right with the sound of my voice, but when I hear it back, I'm like, who is that? It's a real odd thing. Anyway, through watching and listening to myself, work with people, helped me figure some things out. But it's still a beautiful thing to find out new things, I think, you know, and this is like human interaction, it's human connection and healing, you know, transformation. It's beautiful to witness change in people, and often I just think it's like magic, and I quite like just even having it as magic, you know.
Oh yeah, I totally believe
it's
in
like
magic.
A kind of alchemy. It's an alchemy, an energetic alchemy that allows really stuck things to just release, and yeah, we can explain it away in terms of neuroplasticity and neural pathways and all of this sort of stuff, but actually when you witness it, it's something else. It's like a rebirth, a kind of transformation, you know, it's just something else, isn't it?
And I've started recording some of my sessions so I can hear what I'm doing, because I know I've got like the process I try and follow, but I go off script, as it were. I just go off, I leave the path during the session because I'm getting intuitively guided, and suddenly I start saying stuff and I'm like, where the hell did that come from? And so I'm glad at those moments I've got it recorded, because then I can capture it and then reintegrate that into the process. And then think it through. Well, hang on a minute, why did it say that? And then when I can see how they're responding. To me saying that, and the release that comes when I've just said what I've just said. I'm like, well, that clearly is important. Why is that? Okay, well, I'm not gonna worry about that. I'll just incorporate that for now. And so I've been adding bits to that. And also when I'm healing myself, because I'm always testing everything on me, then I get an urge to say this and do this and, you know, bring a bit in. I'm like, well, I'll just try it. And then I have a huge yawn or a huge load of tears come out. Like, wow, that shifted something. And so I end up like this process, like, oh, hang on a minute, like I need to start you know, like streamlining a bit, but I'm allowing it to kind of
to evolve
at the moment, and then think about how I can shape it or make it a bit more sensible and structure it, all the things I'm trying to do. But it's interesting to allow that to come through me. Rather than me thinking that I'm sitting down with all my trauma material, my studies, my rational mind to solve a problem. I'm not trying to solve anything. I'm just allowing it to come through me. And it's achieving really remarkable results for people.
So I've got one last question, then I really must go, because I've got to go and pick my kids up from school. And I'm sure no one's even watching now, because it's kind of gone on for a very long time. But just one last question. So obviously your background is from a very corporate world, working with alpha men, CEOs, marketing, and that's where you started off pre-children. But now when you talk about healing and working with people, you talk using words about, you know, following your intuition and just getting these downloads and being open to that kind of inner guidance. Like who have you subscribed to who has really informed your learning on intuition and intuitive healing? Are there any names that you can share with people? So for me, people like Carolyn Miss and also another Caroline Elliott have really informed my kind of spiritual evolution as a therapist and the way that I work. Has there been anyone like that for you who
I mean, for many years
kind of helped you open up that side of you?
For many years I was very not bored, I was disillusioned with a lot of the personal development stuff, because there wasn't anything new coming forth. I was like, and also because of the tool, because of head trash cleans, when I read a lot of very well established texts that are like, oh, that's the text on X, and I'd read it, go, well, then that's inaccurate because I'm able to do that. So So I was feeling a lot of like, well, where can I go for stuff that for me is cutting edge? And so for me, the stuff that really resonated with a capital T for truth, like when I heard it, I was like, oh, right, yeah. The first person I achieved that was during COVID, Lorna Johnson, who's the founder of Shadow Alchemy. She's batshit crazy. I'm just going to put it out there. And she's evolved a lot. So her tools, Shadow Alchemy, is meant to be very, very fast and very incredible. And she now calls herself Lorna Gabriel. She's a little bit off the wall, right? But she's got some incredible truths that she tells, which I found incredibly valuable to kind of really think about and form my own journey. And then somebody that I'm working with at the moment is somebody called Natasha Bray, who's developed her own
I know Natasha Bray.
Do you? Yeah, and what I love about her, she's also Welsh, so I love like listening to a non-American voice.
And she does RTT as well. So
she's what?
She does RTT, doesn't she? Rapid transformational therapy, I think.
Oh yeah, she's developed her own heart healing modality.
Okay.
So she trains people in that, and then she does lots of but she's like, what I love about her work is the acknowledgement of the hidden wounds that are kind of below the surface. So she goes a lot deeper. You know, she does what I do, but clearly on a whole other level, because she's a cash millionaire several times over. But incredible. Yeah. So yeah, I get very inspired by her and her work, and then take a lot from that. And then Lorna, but it really sort of, I think that's, and Caroline Miss, I've been following her work for ages, and I'm about to dive back into it actually, because I'm really love her archetype work, and I really feel
the archetype's good.
The archetypes is great. So I really kind of feel I've got an archetype, because somebody's asked me if I could do a head trash
for
tarot deck, not a tarot deck, but a deck of cards to help people decide on what they want to heal today, you know. And I thought working with archetypes would be a really useful way to go around that. So I'm going to go back into Caroline's work and
the anatomy of the spirit is my
that's what
my
I was looking at
of hers. I have to say, her other texts have not really hit the spot for me, but she is a prolific writer. She's got so much stuff. So that's really interesting. It's really interesting to hear. You should, if you like the shadow alchemy stuff, you should check out Carolyn Elliott's Existential Kink. I think you'd really like that. And it's really fast as well, and it's sensational. I think you like it. It's really with the feeling. It's a little bit juicy as well. That would be one of my recent ones. That sounds good. Fast.
Well,
listen, I've got to go and get my
you go. Thank you.
But we knew this would go on a bit, didn't we? Thank you so much for sharing everything. It's been fantastic to catch up with you as usual, and I hope that everyone else has enjoyed it. Just quickly, where is the best place? Because I obviously got really stuck in on your head trash website, but you were like, oh no, there's something else that's better. What's the best up-to-date way to follow you, to hear about the stuff that you're doing?
It probably is the head trash site, which is clearyourheadtrash.com, which is just the same type as the book. So that's but if you just put head trash Alexia into Google, you'll find me.
You do come up. You're well SEO'd, Alexia. You're well SEO'd.
And then for those that are interested more from a professional perspective, there's headtrashclearance.com, where it's just about the tool for the professionals, for those that think about training and want to know more about it. So I've kept the consumer and trade separate, so I can kind of talk about it in those ways. So if anybody's interested in knowing more about the technique itself, then headtrashclearance.com.
I'm sure they will be.
Otherwise, clear your head trash if you want to clear your stuff. And all the events and stuff I do through that. So
that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Alexa.
Thank you, Alex. Much appreciated. Loved it.
And I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
I'm sure we will. I'd love to.
All right, you take care.
Okay, bye.